Hello everyone, I'm back with another Harry Potter video comparing the Harry Potter books and the Harry Potter movies. I don't remember where I was or what I was doing in the first video of this series when I was talking about the Sorcerer's Stone, but in the second one I remember it very vividly. I filmed it in front of my Christmas tree. I think I was wearing this exact same shirt. That was over a year ago. It's February now, so that was Christmas 2023. It's shocking that I've been doing this series that long, let alone that I've even lived in this house that long. It's just, I can't believe how long it's been. So today I'm talking about the sixth book, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Just talking about the series, the movies for a little bit first. This is my favorite of the movies. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Draco stan, okay? I think that, I don't want to just compare it to the previous movie, but you know, this is the second movie that David Yates directed, and I believe that there's a different writer. I think I talked about this in my last video, my last video in this series, which was for Order of the Phoenix. I believe there's a different writer between Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince. But it's kind of shocking that they're made by the same director because they're very different. The sixth movie, I don't know if he got a lot of criticism for the way that he was doing things in the fifth one or what, or maybe that's why he got a different writer or something, but the sixth movie is, in my opinion, so much better, more well done than the fifth one in terms of character development. Maybe the actors are advocating for themselves better, or they have an advocate, or they're older, or whatever it is, but the actors really shone in this, the main three, specifically Harry. There's like an element to the books that we lose in most of the movies, and we lose 100% in the fifth one. And this movie, in the Half-Blood Prince movie, I think they kind of got back some of that. Harry is amazing. It's so hilarious. I mean, Daniel Radcliffe, that was where I remember when I first saw that movie and I was thinking, like, Daniel Radcliffe is really good with comedy. Like, Emma Watson is pretty good with drama. Like, this is, like, they really found their, like, place. And it's, like, and that's what he's done since then, mostly, is, like, dark comedy. And so he's shown so well in this movie. Maybe I've been too hard on the previous videos about the previous movies. The fact is, there's no way for them to fit everything in the movie. Every scene, every nuance, and the fact is that this, even though it's third person, like, we really are in Harry's head, and that's very hard to get across in a movie. So I don't want to be too hard on it. It's like, I know that they can't do everything. So it's more of a question of not did they do everything, but did they do what they did they do it well, and did they get the point across? Did they, you know, scenes that they took out, was it kind of implied, or was there some way that they worked around it to make it seem like, you know, that had happened, or whatever, that the development had happened, or that the whatever. So that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about in this video. So getting into this book, there's a mystery element to this book that is kind of iconic in the Harry Potter books series, but we kind of miss out on it a little bit in the fifth book. But we're back to it in this one, and I just really like it. And like I said, it's one of my favorite movies, so I'll be talking about similarities, differences, things that were taken out, and let's get into it. So starting off strong, just like in the movie, it starts out with the scene. Well, I wouldn't say just like in the movie, because in the movie we see the bridge collapsing. In the book, we don't see that. We hear about the after effects of it, and we see a conversation between the Minister of Magic and the Prime Minister. This was one of the first times that we were seeing in the books how the magical and the Muggle world were kind of connected a little bit, and I just really liked that. Not only that, but we are seeing first Fudge talk to the Prime Minister, and then him saying, "I'm actually not Minister of Magic anymore. I'm here to introduce you to the new Minister of Magic because I was sacked because of everything that happened at the end of the last book." So he introduces him to Scrimgeour. That's the way that, okay, so I listened to some of this from a narrator. I'll talk more on that later. But that's the way that this narrator says it. But I'm being honest. He says something's wrong, so I'm not sure what to believe. Anyway, so he introduces him to the new minister, which is Scrimgeour, which in the movies we hear about him in the 7th one. Is he the one? Is that the one where he comes up and he's like on the screen? I think it is. And then he's dead the next thing you know. So he's in it from the beginning of this one, and he's a pretty big character in this. I also want to say, I said this in the last one, Death Eaters do not fly around like that. It's impossible to fly. You can't fly unless you have a broom. What are they doing? Apparating? That's not how apparition works. It frustrates me. And that scene, and the bridge scene, you can see them flying around. They don't do that. But of course, the bridge was, of course, involvement of the Death Eaters somehow. Then jump into the next scene, which we did see as well in the movies of Narcissa Malfoy and Bellatrix Lestrange going to Snape to talk to him about Draco's mission. That did happen in the book as well. It was very similar. Of course, the conversation was much longer, but the same point was getting across. And then the next thing we know is Harry. We're at Harry's house, and in the movies, after that Snape scene, they cut to Harry in the train station at that little like coffee. I don't know what that place was, where he's talking to that girl. 11. That's when I go off. Harry Potter. Who's Harry Potter? And then he sees Dumbledore across the way in the book. And, like, that was a fine scene. I have nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that scene. It's like, oh, Harry, he's enjoying his Muggle summer or whatever. In the book, Dumbledore sends a letter to Harry and says, like, hey, I'm going to pick you up. I have somewhere to go with you. Sends it to his house, and Harry waits for him, and Dumbledore shows up at Privet Drive. And meets the Dursleys again. And it's a really funny scene. He talks to the Dursleys about, like, if you hopefully you're going to keep your house open for one more summer for Harry because he needs your protection until he turns 17. Dumbledore says some, hard-hitting things to the Dursleys, but in general, it's like a pretty light conversation. It's just like super weird for Harry to be there with the Dursleys and Dumbledore. Then they go to see Slughorn, of course. I will say that Slughorn's character is really different in the books than he is in the movie. He's slightly more slimy in the books than he is in the movie. He was much more Slytherin in the books, I'll say that. He was much more Slytherin in the books than he was in the movie. Then Harry goes to the Burrow. Big difference there is that Bill and Fleur are there. This is where we find out that Fleur and Bill are engaged. Of course, they met at the end of the somewhere in the 4th movie book. So they've known each other for a while now, but this is our first time really seeing her again, and Harry was kind of surprised to find out that they were engaged. But anyway, she's like pretty much living at the Burrow for a while, and they all hate her. She's like super annoying and kind of mean. And then also Tonks pops into the Burrow, and she pops into the book quite a few times. She literally pops in. It's like she's popping in and popping out. But Harry tells Ron and Hermione when he's there that Dumbledore is going to be doing private lessons with him this year. This is kind of shocking. And in the movies, the lessons, it's not quite so clear that he's really like doing. I mean, it's not really, okay, lessons is not the right word anyway, but in the movies you're kind of like, oh, Harry and Dumbledore are hanging out a lot. It's not quite said like, hey Harry, we're going to be doing something this year. And Harry tells Hermione and Ron that he is the chosen one, that he heard the prophecy from Dumbledore last year and he told them about it and pretty much, the gist of it, and they didn't have any negative reaction. And he says, a warmth was spreading through him that had nothing to do with the sunlight. A tight obstruction in his chest seemed to be dissolving. He knew that Ron and Hermione were more shocked than they were letting on, but the mere fact that they were still on either side of him, speaking bracing words of comfort, not shrinking away from him as though he were contaminated or dangerous, was worth more than he could ever tell them. And then Harry, similar thing on the train, Harry goes to see what is up with Draco. He doesn't really find anything out. Draco is onto him pretty much from the moment he walks in, and he doesn't really find anything out. And then Draco does Petrificus Totalis on him and he leaves. And then Tonks finds Harry. So they like jump out of the train before it leaves. As school gets started, interesting thing is that it's not like in the movie where there was that scene where she's like, why don't you take potions? Of course it was more Of course, they had like a meeting where they talked all about their next year's classes. Everyone in 6th year has to talk about the classes they're going to be taking that year with McGonagall or with their head of house. So he gets all his figured out. He's not taking divination, and none of them are taking care of magical creatures anymore. So they have a couple of free periods, and they don't know how to tell Hagrid that they're not going to be taking his class. In chapter 10, this is page 194, so we're a ways in, is when Harry starts. He has his first lesson with Dumbledore, and they go into the Pensieve and see a memory of, I don't remember whose memory it was. Maybe it was Marvolo, or his son, maybe. Marvolo, who was Voldemort's grandfather, had 2 kids. The mom was out of the picture, had 2 kids, and he's a Gaunt, Marvolo Gaunt. Boy and a girl. The girl was in love with a muggle that like lived close to them. And we kind of see how they grew up. They were from a very, very rich family, but they had squandered their wealth, and they lived in a little hovel. And they treated the girl really, really badly. And they were indeed heirs of Slytherin. However, the male, her brother, I believe he died with no kids, of course. And then she had Tom Riddle with a muggle who we later learned she probably drugged with a love potion to like get married and run away with her, and she had a baby, but she stopped giving him the love potion, and he left her before she had the baby. But I always thought that was kind of an interesting little history there. And that continues on throughout, in the next Pensieve dates that they have. Then later on, they find out that Stan Shunpike has been arrested and is being questioned for being a Death Eater, even though it's like really obvious that he's not, and that he was maybe under the Imperius or maybe I don't know what, but he's like obviously not a Death Eater, and they're kind of frustrated by that. It's kind of the first in a line of many things that the Ministry has been doing to make it look like they're doing something. Then, in the moment, this was not very important, but I think it had big implications, was that Harry got Levicorpus nonverbal spell from the Half-Blood Prince, and he used it on Ron, and it just held him up by his ankle, and we actually saw that in the previous book in Harry's, in Snape's memory of Harry's dad doing that to Snape. But anyway, we see it here, and he just does it on Ron, and it's like pretty, it was just like a funny spell. Now, that doesn't really mean anything except that the implications are that he kind of had a little bit of a reason to trust that the spells in this book were not any big deal. It's like kind of crazy to like just do a spell you've never heard of for your enemy from a book. Just like a random book. It's kind of crazy. But he had this like level of trust with the Half-Blood Prince that was helped by this spell that he learned from there. Because it wasn't like there was just one spell. There was also this spell, which was like, harmless. So that was kind of interesting. Then there's a scene that we don't have, and I felt that it would be somewhat important. That was Ron sees Dean and Ginny kissing. And he's like shocked by this, and he like blows up on Ginny, and she's like, it's not that big of a deal. Harry kissed Cho, and Hermione kissed Victor Krum, and Ron is like going on and on about it. Then later he's like, do you really think that, to Harry, do you really think that Hermione kissed Krum? And Harry's like, I don't know, but he really wanted to say like, yeah, of course. That was maybe something that sparked, it was maybe one of the things that had the domino going as far as him then going out with Lavender. Because Harry even says, he says later, like he thinks that he wishes that he could tell Hermione, like, he's just doing this because he found out that you kissed Krum. So Harry was like totally in on it, like he totally knew what was going on, even though maybe both Ron and Hermione did not know. And there was a really funny scene just a few pages later, after Lavender and Ron are, together, I guess. And Hermione says that she's going to take Cormac McLaggen to the Christmas party. So she says, yes, I'm meeting Cormac at 8, and there was a noise like a plunger. There was a noise like a plunger being withdrawn from a block. There There was a there was a noise like a plunger being withdrawn from a blocked sink, and Ron resurfaced. Hermione acted as though she had not seen or heard anything. "We're going up to the party together." "Cormac?" said Parvati. "Cormac McLaggen, you mean?" "That's right," Hermione said sweetly. "The one who almost," she put a great deal of emphasis on the word, "became Gryffindor keeper." "Are you going out with him, then?" asked Parvati, wide-eyed. "Oh, yes, didn't you know?" said Hermione, with a most un-Hermione-ish giggle. "No," said Parvati, looking positively agog at this piece of gossip. "Wow, you like your Quidditch players, don't you? First Krum, then McLaggen?" "I like really good Quidditch players," Hermione corrected her, still smiling. "Well, see you. Gotta go and get ready for the party." She left. At once, Lavender and Parvati put their heads together to discuss this new development, with everything they had ever heard about McLaggen and all they had ever guessed about Hermione. So I wanted to say that the middle part of this book I actually listened to while we were going on our road trip from Stephen Fry. It changed my perception of this book a lot, in a good way. It was only the middle third or so that I listened to, but which was perfect because it's not so serious in there, and he gave it this kind of like comedy of errors type of attitude to the whole book, and like there's funniness in the book, and there's funniness in the movie too, and like Daniel Radcliffe does such a good job of that, as I said, but this was like making it even better. Every character is kind of on the same wavelength as Daniel Radcliffe was in some of the scenes in the 6th movie. So I really enjoyed, and the scene of Ron getting the love potion was so funny to read. I was literally giggling. Everyone in the car was asleep except for me, and I was driving through South Dakota giggling. It was so well done. So if you have the time, highly recommend listening to the Stephen Fry version of this book. I'd love to read, I'd love to go back and read all of them with him as the narrator. So it's just been really, it was a very good experience. Then after the Christmas party, Harry sees Draco, or he like follows Draco out and hears his and Snape's conversation. The conversation in the book was much longer, and so we learn more information, and we see a different side of Snape. In the movie, he's kind of like, "You're being dumb," In the book, he was almost pleading with Draco to let him in. And we're seeing a little bit more of, dare I call it, movie Snape? Overall, Alan Rickman does such an amazing job of Snape, but he's not highly accurate. He's much cooler in the movies than he is in the books. But we're kind of seeing that come out a little bit more in Snape of the books, starting in this book. Not only is he not quite so bad or like mean for no reason, but he also has this kind of like human-esque-ness about him that he doesn't have in the other books, and especially knowing what we know, if you know the whole story, just knowing, Harry obviously is misinterpreting a lot of Snape's emotions toward the end of the book, and just seeing Snape with those emotions and knowing what those mean is like, oh. So the conversation was more informative, but it got across the same thing. Snape wanted to know something that Draco was doing. Draco had an important job to do. Snape didn't know what it was. Snape, though, was pleading with Draco to tell him. Draco's really frustrated that Snape wants some of the glory, but also seems frustrated that it's even a conversation. Like, he doesn't even want anyone to be talking about this, thinking about this, knowing about this. He has it in the bag, As we know, he doesn't actually have it in the bag. Then we go home for Christmas, and very different than I don't even know why. Honestly, what, did they think they needed more? Let me just explain. So, in the Christmas of the books, it's all of the Weasleys, including Fleur and Bill, not including Percy, of course, and the only thing that happens is that Percy, shows up, and they're kind of shocked. He's with the minister, and it all turns out that he showed up to give the minister an in so that the minister could come and talk to Harry. And he talks to Harry really wanting him to be like a frontman for the ministry and to kind of show that he like backs the ministry. And Harry is like, are you kidding? Literally, are you kidding? And it gets kind of tense. And of course he ends up refusing him, and Scrimgeour is like, so I guess you're really Dumbledore's man. And Harry's like, yeah, I am. That's what happens in the book during Christmas. He also talks to Mr. Weasley about what Draco said to Snape, and kind of what Draco's been up to, because Mr. Weasley got a promotion, so he has a little bit more knowing. He knows a little bit more about what's going on in the Ministry. And he talks to Lupin a little bit as well. Of course, he learns that Lupin has kind of been living among the werewolves to kind of get them onto the good side, you know. But there in the movie, it is completely different. First of all, they make it seem like Tonks and Lupin are together at Christmas, okay? Secondly, they get attacked by Fenrir Greyback, Bellatrix Lestrange, and maybe some others, and the burrow burns down. And there's a weird dynamic between Harry and Ginny. That's kind of where it starts. We'll talk about Ginny some more later. That scene served almost no purpose in the movie, so I don't know why they did it. Just to show maybe the tensions are high or something, and they wanted another action scene. They didn't need it. They did not need another action scene. They could have spent a little bit more time maybe on the little fight that happened at Hogwarts, but instead they did this. Didn't make any sense. They could have made the Christmas scene a lot shorter. We didn't need that attack. It was very strange. Then we see another memory from Dumbledore. Not from Dumbledore, but another memory in his Pensieve, which was pretty much that as an adult, Tom Riddle goes to his old house. He meets his uncle, who's like drunk and maybe crazy. He was in Azkaban for a while. And his grandfather is also either in Azkaban or has already died. And his uncle has the ring. Now, the uncle ended up dying a few days later, and the ring was gone. Also, the Riddle house up the street, where his father still lived, Tom Riddle Sr. and his two parents were killed mysteriously, obviously by the killing curse. And I actually had forgotten that his father was still alive and that he killed him. Didn't remember that. Then we see the memory that Slughorn gave to Dumbledore. And the interesting thing is that he actually says Horcrux in the original memory. So from that point on, Harry knows that it has something to do with Horcruxes. And they try to look it up, but they couldn't really figure anything out. Then Harry goes to his potions class, and they do an antidotes lesson. And the antidote that he makes was from his book, The Half-Blood Prince, which said just shove a Bezoar down their throats. And Slughorn thought that was really funny, you know. But that was relevant because then just a few days later is when Ron gets poisoned. Now, so it was like on the brain. Then they do apparition training. Now they start their training and they're able to take a test in April or something for people who have already turned 17. There's another test, must be at the beginning of the next year, for people who turned 17 over the summer. But they all practice it in Hogwarts, and Harry does okay. And then the scene of Ron getting the love potion was so hilarious. And of course, as I said, it was even more hilarious in Stephen Fry's voice and the way that he read it. Then, since Ron is out, they have to have McLaggen be on the team as a keeper. And he's horrible. And he hits Harry with a bludger. And Harry passes out and he goes to the hospital wing with... Ron is already there. That's when he has the idea to have Kreacher trail Draco. So he starts that off there. Then we see a couple more memories. Essentially, we see memories of Voldemort getting all of the important things that he needs. We learn that he worked at Borgin and Burke's for a while. But it was just to get these artifacts that he wanted, which was he wanted the locket, which had been sold by his mother. He already had the ring, and he wanted the goblet, which was, I believe, Hufflepuff's goblet. Then we also see a memory of after, I think it was 10 years after Tom Riddle graduated or whatever, he goes back to Dumbledore, who's now headmaster, to get a job, and he looks, we can guess that he's already made some of or all of his Horcruxes. He looks really bad. And Dumbledore says in no uncertain terms, you're going down a bad path and I don't want you teaching here. I don't think it would be good. Then we learn, and this is not really any surprise, but he wanted to get the Defense Against the Dark Arts job. Since that time, it has been cursed in that nobody has lasted more than a year. Now, that is interesting information because it confirms that Dumbledore knew that there was, I don't want to say a curse, whatever, but he knew that whoever the teacher was not going to last more than a year, which gives a little bit more, like maybe that was the main reason why he didn't want Snape being in that position, because he wanted him to stay at Hogwarts. Harry then figures out, of course, with the help of the elves, that Draco has been going to the Room of Requirement, and he's been having Crabbe and Goyle stand guard for him with the use of Polyjuice, so they always think that it's like it's not Crabbe and Goyle standing there, it's like some random kid standing there all the time. But they still don't know what he's been doing in there, and he can't figure out a way to get in. Then Harry is still trying to get that memory from Slughorn, and to be honest, this is kind of where Dumbledore's crazy requests start to come in, because in my opinion, he hasn't really asked too much of Harry yet. Like, in the zeitgeist, it's kind of the idea is that, like, Dumbledore is actually the villain, which I was, like, totally on board for. In fact, I read a lot of, specifically the last fan fiction I read, which was The Fool, the Emperor, and the Hangman, was very, very negative on Dumbledore, and I was kind of eating that up. Now that I'm rereading these books, I'm thinking, like, I don't know. I wouldn't really call him the villain, but this was kind of a crazy request. Not only did he say, like, you have to get it, nobody else can get it, it has to be you, but also just requesting that of him, and then making it known to Harry that it was like they couldn't go on without it. There was literally no reason for them. Like, they had to have it. He even goes to Dumbledore once for one of their meetings, and he tells him he hasn't got the memory yet, and Dumbledore was like, oh, then go. So it was a little bit like he was really asking a lot of Harry. Then Aragog dies, and we find out the day before the burial, Hagrid sends a letter to the kids asking them to come, and they're like, we can't go because security is really strict. They were not planning on going. So Harry actually had a reason to go down to Hagrid's hut when he had the Felix Felicis. I got this from the Scholastic Book Fair. It's a frog. So it's another day. It's the next day, different location, but let's just get straight into it. So as I said, they got, I keep wanting to say Shelob. They got the Aragog, like, message that Aragog had died, and they were like, there's no way we can go. Why did he even ask us? They were kind of annoyed that he even asked them to go. Harry gets the idea to take Felix Felicis to talk to Slughorn. So he only takes a little bit of it. He does not take the whole thing. He takes just like a little mouthful. And because he knows that he's only going to need a couple of hours to do it. And instantly when he takes it, he has this feeling of, let me just see. Slowly but surely, an exhilarating sense of infinite opportunity stole through him. He felt as though he could have done anything at all, and getting the memory from Slughorn seemed suddenly not only possible, but positively easy. And this scene overall is pretty similar to the movie. Like I said before, Daniel Radcliffe did such an amazing job. It was unprecedented. He goes out of the portrait hole under his invisibility cloak, and he pushes between Dean and Ginny. And at this point, he had already been thinking that he wished to use the Felix Felicis to, like, get Ginny, or, like, to have them break up or something. He already has a big crush on her. And so he pushes between them, and it like kind of starts a fight between them. So he goes down to Hagrid's, but on the way he goes through the vegetable patch and he happens to see Slughorn taking some leaves. He's actually getting them from Professor Sprout. Like, Professor Sprout is literally giving him some stuff, and of course he's going to use it in his classroom. And he sees Harry, and he's like, what are you doing going down? What are you doing out of the castle? And he's like, I'm going to Hagrid's because of this giant spider. He doesn't just say, like, come with me, I'm going to Hagrid's. He actually says, like, it's just really sad. Hagrid's giant spider died, and blah, blah, blah. And that is why Slughorn goes with him, because he wants to get the Acromantula venom. So, like I said about him being, like, slightly more slimy and a little bit more Slytherin-y in the books, he really is, like, and this is an example of that. He knows why Harry's going down there. He lets Harry go down there, and he goes with him for the purpose of getting the Acromantula venom. So they go down there, and he actually takes the venom without asking Hagrid. And then the scene of getting the memory was pretty much the same. Harry tries to go back to the common room after that, but it's after midnight, and the fat lady is like, there's a different password. You're going to have to sleep outside. He finds out that Dumbledore's back from, wherever he's been going. He's been off, like half this book he's gone. But he finds out that Dumbledore's back, and he's like, oh, this is an important thing, so I'm just going to go to him right now. So he actually, goes to Dumbledore's office right there. Now, the memory is a little bit different, because in the movie, first of all, in the first memory that's been tampered with, we don't hear that he says Horcruxes. So we spend this whole, whatever amount of movie this was, not knowing anything about Horcruxes, and it's not until after he gets the memory and all this stuff has happened, it's not until then that we learn that it's Horcruxes that have been talking to him. It kind of becomes clear throughout the course of this, the real memory, why he... Well, I still don't know why he didn't take the Horcruxes part out of the tampered with one, but it does become clear why he was really ashamed to give it to Dumbledore. They just have a long conversation about Horcruxes, and it seems slightly more like Slughorn doesn't really mind talking about dark magic with a student. Then afterward, which we get so much of this in this book, and it does feel really reminiscent of the first couple of books, where Harry, there's expose. Harry asks Dumbledore 10,000 questions, and we get 10,000 answers, and they talk forever. He tells Harry that the diary was a Horcrux. The reason why Dumbledore thought that there would be more than one Horcrux is because he was pretty sure that that one was a Horcrux, because he had never heard of that kind of memory, whatever, any of that happening in any other instance. But he was shocked by how kind of blasé Voldemort had been about this diary. He had just given it to one of his followers to take back to the school someday. It was obviously meant to be the object that made it obvious that Voldemort was the heir of Slytherin. But the way they talk about it was really interesting. Perhaps at the point of death, he might be aware of his loss, but he was not aware, for instance, that the diary had been destroyed until he forced the truth out of Lucius Malfoy. When Voldemort discovered that the diary had been mutilated and robbed of all its powers, I'm told his anger was terrible to behold. Harry says, but I thought he meant Lucius Malfoy to smuggle it into Hogwarts. Yes, he did, years ago, when he was sure he would be able to create more Horcruxes, but still Lucius was supposed to wait for Voldemort to say so, and he never received it, for Voldemort vanished shortly after giving him the diary. No doubt he thought that Lucius would not dare do anything with the Horcrux other than guard it carefully, but he was counting too much upon Lucius's fear of a master who had already been gone for years, and whom Lucius believed dead. Of course, Lucius did not know what the diary really was. I understand that Voldemort had told him the diary would cause the Chamber of Secrets to reopen because it was cleverly enchanted. Had Lucius known he beheld a portion of his master's soul in his hands, he would have undoubtedly have treated it with more reverence. But instead, he went ahead and carried out the old plan for his own ends. By planting the diary upon Arthur Weasley's daughter, he hoped to discredit Arthur and get rid of a highly incriminating magical object in one stroke. We know this already. Voldemort's greatest weakness is his pride, and this was just a glowing example of it, and that he gave the Horcrux to one of his followers, saying oh, it's going to open the Chamber of Secrets, so take it to Hogwarts when I tell you, and not telling them that it was a Horcrux. I mean, if he would have told Lucius, that, yeah, no doubt. Lucius would have hit it very well. I mean, I'm thinking of, you know, I'm conflating. Okay, Lucius, we don't know him that well. He maybe would not have hit it very well, but anyway, right after that, they start talking about the prophecy and how Harry can, he's going to have to destroy the Horcruxes, or somebody destroy them. He doesn't have to destroy them. Before being able to kill Voldemort, and he's the one who's going to have to kill Voldemort. And they talk about the prophecy a little bit, and Dumbledore says, well, you have something that Voldemort does not have. Harry's like, yeah, my ability to love, I roll. And Dumbledore says, like, this is an amazing power, like, you're not understanding it. And there's a lot of back and forth, and he pretty much explains to Harry that Voldemort made that prophecy come true. He could have been unstoppable, but he was so worried about the prophecy that he made it come true. He could have ignored it and it would never have happened. He was the one who did the action that started that domino effect that made it all happen. He made his greatest enemy. Later, at the end of the chapter, he says, but he understood at last, but he understood at last what Dumbledore had been trying to tell him. It was, he thought, the difference between being dragged into the arena to face a battle to the death and walking into the arena with your head held high. Some people perhaps would say that there was little to choose between the two ways, but Dumbledore knew, and so do I, thought Harry, with a rush of fierce pride, and so did my parents, that there was all the difference in the world. Then we get this Sectum Sempris chapter, and I was actually shocked by how late it happened. Harry finds out that Dean and Ginny broke up, and he's pretty happy about that. He sees, maybe that day or a couple days later, he sees Draco in the bathroom. Well, on the Marauders map, he sees Draco in the bathroom with Moaning Myrtle, and he's thinking, what the heck? What is going on here? He goes to the bathroom, and he sees Draco crying and talking to Moaning Myrtle, saying, I can't do it, he's going to kill me, but I can't do it, blah, blah, blah. Harry, reveals himself, and they get into it. Draco actually throws the first hex, or whatever you call it, curse, and then he was in the middle of doing Crucio when Harry gives Sectum Sempra. Well, I think he just thought it would be something kind of bad, but not, he had no idea that it would be at the level that it was at. And instant regret. Sectum Sempra bellowed Harry from the floor, waving his wand wildly. Blood spurted from Malfoy's face and chest as though he had been slashed with an invisible sword. He staggered backwards and collapsed onto the waterlogged floor with a great splash, his wand falling from his limp right hand. No, gasped Harry. Slipping and staggering, Harry got to his feet and plunged toward Malfoy, whose face was now shining scarlet, his white hand scrabbling at the blood-soaked chest. No, I didn't. Harry didn't know what he was saying. He fell to his knees beside Malfoy, who was shaking uncontrollably in a pool of his own blood. Moaning Myrtle let out a deafening scream. Murder! Murder in the bathroom! Murder! And that's when Snape comes in. Snape fixes his wounds and takes him to the hospital wing, and he says, stay here. And Harry just stays there. Comes back and he says, he does legilimency on him, and he sees the book, floating in his mind, and he says, bring me all of your books. So Harry goes and gets all the books, but he switches out. He takes Ron's potions book, and he takes his book to the room of requirement, and all he thinks is, I need a place to hide this. And he takes it in there, and notably he sets it right below the tiara. Interestingly, that's really different from the movie. First of all, we're not seeing Snape give Harry any disciplinary action in that scene, as well as Harry hides the book later after talking through it with his friends and deciding that the book was bad. He hides it, and Jenny's in there with the freaking, I can hide in here too. None of that happens. Harry actually hides the book out of, he just doesn't want Snape to find it. He's planned on going back and getting it later. Now he goes to Snape. Snape looks through the book and he says, really? This is your book? And Harry's like, yeah. And he's like, why does it say Roomwell Weaslib or whatever it says? And he's like, that's my nickname. And I don't know, Snape buys it, but he gives him detention every single Saturday at 10 a.m. for the rest of the semester or the year, which is the time of the game. So he's not going to be able to be in any Quidditch games, and he's the captain. So they were very, very, very mad. His team was very, very mad when he found that out. Obviously, Ginny is on the team as well. So he goes and he does that Saturday. He does the detention with Snape, and Draco's pretty much fine. He heals up pretty fast. But I think it was like mostly because Snape knew the counter curse and he was there right away. But definitely Snape knows, like 100% knows that Harry had his book, but he doesn't want to press too hard on it, I think. But he does, anyway, Harry does the detention, and he comes back to, he doesn't even know if they won or lost the game, but he goes back to the common room and they're celebrating. They had a huge game. They had a huge win. There was Ginny running toward him. She had a hard, blazing look in her face as she threw her arms around him, and without thinking, without planning it, without worrying about the fact that 50 people were watching, Harry kissed her. And then, after several long moments, or it may have been half an hour, or possibly several sunlit days, they broke apart. So that was a big win for Harry, of course. So then, Hermione has obviously been looking around for who the Half-Blood Prince is, and she finds Eileen Prince in the, I don't know, in the Prophet somewhere. And he's like, what? And she's like, Eileen Prince. Maybe Eileen Prince was a half-blood. Harry's like, it couldn't be a girl. And Hermione's really offended by that. But obviously there was some truth to both of their statements. So the interesting thing though, and obviously it doesn't come out until later, but I'm going to talk about it now because I know I'll forget later. But the interesting thing is that I actually forgot that Snape's dad was a muggle. Not even muggle born. His dad was really a muggle, which I don't remember, like I didn't remember that. And so he really was saying half-blood prince. Where I was thinking it was like half of his blood is prince blood. So I was misinterpreting that. But anyway, on to the next thing. Harry finds, this is such a weird scene. Harry finds, and of course it wasn't in the movie, Harry finds Professor Trelawney trying to hide her sherry bottles in the room of requirement, but she gets kicked out because somebody was in there, and somebody was in there who was whooping for joy. And Harry's like, oh, it was definitely Draco. He's finally finished his whatever he's doing. And she also tells him that, and I don't even know how they got there, it was kind of a stretch, but she also tells him that when she was being interviewed, and that was the memory that Harry saw, which was the prophecy, when he was being interviewed, they were interrupted by Snape, who was listening at the door, who heard the first half of the prophecy, and he was the one who told Voldemort about it. When Harry goes to Dumbledore about this, Dumbledore pretty much says, you don't understand, I have a rock solid reason to trust Snape, and I don't want to hear it anymore. And he says that was, what does he say? But he did not know. He had no possible way of knowing which boy Voldemort would hunt from then onward. Or that the parents he would destroy in his murderous quest were people that Professor Snape knew, that they were your mother and father. Harry let out a yell of mirthless laughter. He hated my dad like he hated Sirius. Haven't you noticed, Professor, how the people Snape hates tend to end up dead? You have no idea of the remorse Professor Snape... You have no idea of the remorse Professor Snape... You have no idea of the remorse Professor Snape felt when he realized how Lord Voldemort had interpreted the prophecy, Harry. I believe it to be the greatest regret of his life and the reason that he returned. And then they go on to talk about more stuff. And then Dumbledore says, I found the next Horcrux. Do you want to come with me? Because Harry had previously asked, can I go with you to find the next one? And Dumbledore said yes. Now that was another questionable thing that he did. I'm thinking, huh? That doesn't make any sense. Now, he did need to take somebody, and this is where the, Dumbledore's the villain kind of comes in, because as far as this and asking Harry to get that memory from Slughorn, those are two things that just don't make sense to ask of Harry. Otherwise, I'm kind of falling off the Dumbledore is the villain train. Now, we'll talk more about that in the next book, because that's when we really find out more about Dumbledore's history and his past and his morals, etc. Harry then runs back to the common room to get his invisibility cloak, and he gives the Felix Felicis to Ron and Hermione, and says to give some to Ginny too. And he says, and he gives them Marauder's map as well. And he says that he knows something is going to be going down that night, or he presumes that something will be, because whatever Draco's been trying to do all year, he finally did it, and he thinks something is going to be going down. So he gives that to them, and he runs out. So then we go to very similar to the almost exactly the same as the movie. So then at the end of the chapter, when they're about to go back to Hogwarts, Harry said, it's going to be all right. We're nearly there. I can apparate us both back. Don't worry. I'm not worried, Harry, said Dumbledore, his voice a little stronger despite the freezing water. I am with you. Which is very sweet, and also it was kind of a callback to Harry said that to Dumbledore. Also, Harry apparates them back. He hasn't gotten his license yet, and he's never done apparition by himself, but he pulls it together and he apparates them both back to Hogsmeade, which was very cool. Gets there, they see they apparate, obviously, okay, this is another thing. It just bothers me when they, like, break the rules for no reason. So, like, the flying Death Eaters and stuff, it's like, whose idea was this? Like, it just doesn't make sense that they would do it. It's just to look cool. And another thing is, they don't apparate off of the Astronomy Tower or onto the Astronomy Tower. And he doesn't say, like, being the headmaster has its perks. No. If there's a rule against apparating, nobody can apparate from anywhere. So, no, they did not apparate from inside the school. They apparate out of and into Hogsmeade. They end up flying from Hogsmeade to the Astronomy Tower on brooms. And when they get there, shortly after they get there, Draco comes in. Harry's under the invisibility cloak. He has been, like, pretty much this whole time. And Dumbledore, instead of blocking the Expelliarmus from Draco, he does a Petrificus Totalis to Harry, and he's disarmed by Draco. And he's, like, sliding down the wall. He's like lost all of his power and energy. Dumbledore has, and he has a long conversation with Draco as well. Very similar to the movie. However, he offers a deal to Draco pretty much, which is like, we can put you in hiding, we can help you, we can save you pretty much if you just, don't do this. And Draco doesn't really believe him. I think he's really scared of Voldemort. He doesn't believe him. I just gotta eat a mandolin. I'll have to take a little break. So, yeah, the scene is mostly the same, but Draco is lowering his wand. It was obvious to Harry, and he even says it later. Like, he knew that Draco was not going to kill Dumbledore. Not only was he not a killer, but he just was, like, giving feeble attempts at it, and he just wasn't going to do it. So then some Death Eaters come in. He explains that he's been fixing the Vanishing Cabinet. Only a few of them come in. It's like 5 or some of them come in. It's not that many. But Harry can hear them fighting below, and then a couple of them come through, and it's like people we don't know. It's Alecto and Amicus, and then one other dude we don't know, and Fenrir Greyback. So Bellatrix was not there. And she made a lot of appearances in this movie. Now, to my knowledge, the only scene that Bellatrix is in is that first scene when she's with Narcissa talking to Snape. She doesn't pop up at Christmas, and she doesn't pop up now. Anyway, but Fenrir Greyback is there, and he actually is in the room where Draco's trying to kill Dumbledore. He's in the Astronomy Tower. And Dumbledore says, I'm kind of surprised that you brought Fenrir Greyback here. And Draco says, I didn't. Yes, I am a little shocked that Draco here invited you, of all people, into the school where his friends live. I didn't, breathed Malfoy. He was not looking at Fenrir. He did not seem to want to even glance at him. I didn't know he was going to come. Then, next page, they're telling Draco, like, do it, Draco, do it, and he just can't do it. Then, next page, the door of the ramparts burst open once more, and there stood Snape, his wand clutched in his hand, and his eyes black. His black eyes swept the scene, from Dumbledore slumped against the wall, to the 4 Death Eaters, including the enraged werewolf and Malfoy. We've got a problem, Snape, said the lumpy Amicus, whose eyes and wand were fixed alike upon Dumbledore. The boy doesn't seem able, but somebody else had spoken Snape's name quite softly. Severus. The sound frightened Harry beyond anything he had experienced all evening. For the first time, Dumbledore was pleading. Snape said, well, that's not the first time, because he was pleading when he was taking the potion. Snape said nothing, but walked forward and pushed Malfoy roughly out of the way. The 3 Death Eaters fell back without a word. Even the werewolf seemed cowed. Snape gazed for a moment at Dumbledore, and there was revulsion and hatred etched in the harsh lines of his face. Severus, please. Snape raised his wand and pointed directly at Dumbledore. Now, as I said earlier, Harry misinterprets many of the emotions he sees from Snape. And that's it's purposeful on the part of the author, of course. But I thought this was so great because it's so obvious to Harry, like, he hates Dumbledore. That's why he's killing him. He's hated him for years because Snape is so evil. And to us who know the whole story, spoilers, by the way, that he is so, what does it say? Revulsion and hatred. Hates that Dumbledore's making him do this. And that Dumbledore has put him through so much. I mean, Voldemort, of course, has also put him through so much. But Dumbledore, in a similar way, Snape has gone through it for him. This is another example of him, dare I say, being one of Dumbledore's most loyal servants, if you will. Harry chases them out onto the grounds. He does pass the whole fight. He sees everybody fighting. People from the Order, people from the DA, and then, of course, Death Eaters. But there's not that many of them. And he starts to fight them on the ground. Or they set Hagrid's hut on fire. And Hagrid is there, and he's being cursed. And he's holding his own, you know. And Harry starts to fight with Snape, and he tells Snape, don't run away from me, you coward. And before he could finish his jinx, excruciating pain hit Harry. He kneeled over in the grass. Someone was screaming. He would surely die of this agony. Snape was going to torture him to death or madness. No, roared Snape's voice, and the pain stopped as suddenly as it had started. Harry lay curled on the grass, clutching his wand and panting. Somewhere overhead, Snape was shouting, have you forgotten our orders? Potter belongs to the Dark Lord. We are to leave him. Go, go. So he stopped somebody from doing what we're assuming is Crucio on Harry. But Harry says he doesn't care if he lives or dies, or he thinks he doesn't care if he lives or dies, pushes himself to his feet and staggers after Snape. Says he hates Snape as much as he hates Voldemort, and he tries to do Sectum Sempra on him. Kill me like you killed him, you coward. That's what Harry says. Don't, screamed Snape, and his face was suddenly demented, inhuman, as though he was in just as much pain as the yelping, howling dog stuck in the burning house behind them. Call me a coward. As I just wanted to say that, I just felt like that was another example of Harry kind of misinterpreting Snape's emotions. Knowing that Dumbledore told Snape to kill him, or it was all planned out. Knowing that gives us a little bit more of an insight as far as, Snape did not want to do that. The Death Eaters, they separate from Hogsmeade. Harry goes back to the castle, and he sees Ginny there. He sees Dumbledore's body. He kneels down next to the body. He finds the locket in his pocket, or he sees the locket fell out of his pocket, and he sees that it was fake, and he reads the message inside right there. That's when he learns that it's fake. And then Ginny takes him to the hospital wing, because everybody's in the hospital wing. They see that Bill has been maimed by Fenrir Greyback. There's a long conversation about that, but I think, he's going to be okay. And Ginny has to tell all of them that Dumbledore is dead. None of them knew it. So, yikes. McGonagall asks Harry what he was doing with Dumbledore, and he says, I can't tell you, and she's somewhat understanding. Then, just a little bit later, she says that she's talking with all the teachers, and she says that she thinks the school is going to have to be closed. Just a couple pages after that, Harry tells Ginny that they're not going to be able to be together, and she takes it really well. I mean, movie Ginny could never. Ginny, listen, he said very quietly. I can't be involved with you anymore. We've got to stop seeing each other. We can't be together. She said with an oddly twisted smile, it's for some stupid, noble reason, isn't it? It's been like something out of someone else's life these last few weeks with you, but I can't. I've got to do things alone now. She did not cry. She simply looked at him. Voldemort uses people his enemies are close to. He's already used you as bait once, and that was just because you're my best friend's sister. Think of how much danger you'll be in if we keep this up. He'll know, he'll find out. He'll try and get to me through you. What if I don't care? Said Ginny fiercely. Book Ginny. I care, said Harry. How do you think I'd feel if this was your funeral, and it was my fault? And then she says that Hermione told her to date other people and relax around him so that he could see her real personality, because she was always so uptight around him because she liked him so much. And it actually worked, of course. And it's true that Ginny's a big character in this, and also she's not just there all the time, but she's actually having a personality and being really cool and funny and awesome. I mean, she does in the other books as well, but she's really a 3D character in this one. And then this is just, what, one page from the end? Harry tells Ron and Hermione that he doesn't think he'll be coming back next year because he wants to go to the Dursleys for a little while because that's what Dumbledore would have wanted him to do. And then he wants to go to Godric's Hollow and see his parents' graves and then, you know, on from there. And they said, well, you have to go to Bill and Fleur's wedding, first of all. Secondly, we're going to be going with you. And that was just a really sweet little thing. And I mean, that was very similar to the end of the movie. However, there were some differences in the movie. And overall, as I said before, I think that movie is like one of the best of the whole series. Did a really good job of squishing a ton of information into a, you know, regular length movie. And as well as if you have the ability to see the extra scenes that are in the like theatrical cut or whatever they call it, then that also helps the movie to be a little bit more rounded out. You can see those on Peacock. So overall, I do really like this movie. A lot of the things that are different between the book and the movie are that they just moved them around within the movie to, you know, they don't want to revisit the same thing 2 times. Instead, they'll just put it at one of those times or whatever it is. One of the hugest downfalls and the biggest letdown in the movies is Jenny's character. Now, there's not one person who's to blame, certainly, for Jenny's character of the movies. Part of it is the actress was badly cast. Nothing against the actress herself, but she was not meant for that role. And part of it was the writing. I don't know why she was written like that. And then, I mean, they could have tried hard. It was almost like they realized how the actress Bonnie, I don't remember her last name, how she was playing that character. They realized how she was playing it, and they were like, oh, let's just go with that. It was almost like they didn't push back at all. They could have put this final scene in there. Instead, they had them not even dating in 6th year. I mean, there was like so many awkward scenes between them in 6th year that everyone hates. And then in 7th year, she's not a character until they're like at the very, very end. And if they would have just added that last scene, if they would have had them, you know, I think they could have made it a little bit more clear that Harry had a crush on her that was growing throughout the entire year, had them kiss after, you know, a Quidditch match of some sort, and then have him saying to her, we can't be together, you're going to be used against me, and I don't want you to get hurt. And that just her reaction in that conversation would have given her more of a personality and would have made her more of a stronger character. And I just hated that they didn't include any of that, and her character is so terrible in the movies. And it reflects on Harry because it's like, why would Harry ever go for her? She's like the worst. She's like the most 2-dimensional. She's like freaking 1-dimensional. She has no personality or anything. Why would he go for her instead of, say, Hermione? So as I've said before, one of the big reasons I started making this little series of videos is that my husband has never read the books, and he'll watch the movies and be like, why this, why that? And one of his big questions is, why didn't Harry get with Hermione? Yeah, if you're watching the movies, you might think that. Why wouldn't Harry like Hermione? Why would he go for somebody like Ginny over this amazing character who's right next to him? Well, Hermione comes off a lot differently in the books, and they have a very obviously sibling-like relationship in the books. And Ginny's character, of course, is so different throughout all of the books. But starting in the 5th, and then especially in this one, she becomes a friend of in their group. She's a big part of the DA. He sees, she's fiery, she's powerful, she always has like a comeback. That dynamic works really well with like the sassy Harry. Another character difference, of course, was Ron and Hermione are slightly different, and their dynamic makes more sense in the books because Hermione is a little bit more quippy in the books than she is in the movie, and Ron is a little bit more like thinking on his feet and silly than he is in the movies. Overall, this book is more... the characters in the book have a lightheartedness about them that, of course, doesn't come across in the movies because the movies are pretty dark. So, overall, like, do I think that Hermione and Ron would really be together in just concerning the books? Honestly, I think it's very likely. I don't think that it, like, doesn't make any sense. As you know, I'm, like, a really big fan of the Dramini pairing, but truthfully, considering only the books, Ron and Hermione don't not make sense. I think that the movies played a huge part. Maybe that is, like, it's because of the movies that people feel like Hermione and Ron are not a good pair, and maybe Draco and Hermione, like, they have some things that, because Hermione is quite a bit more dramatic and serious and flawless in the movies, much more than she is in the books. So, overall, amazing, wonderful reading experience. What do you think about, I mean, I know this is like, you've been thinking about this for 10, 15 years, or whenever that movie came out, it was so long ago. But what do you think about the differences between the book and the movie? What do you think the movie could have improved on? What do you love about the movie? What do you love about the book? I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, and anything I missed, because I know I definitely missed some things. So let me know, and I will see you in the next video.